Welcome everyone to the first Croft House Mentorship Program session. Today we're joined by Jeremy Springall and the Croft Mentorship team, and we'll be looking at what makes a good mentor, leadership through example. Jeremy recently retired from being Senior Vice President at SITA at Borders for over 7 years, being with the company for over 9 years. Before that, he held 2 vice presidencies at CGI for almost 4 years and held senior positions at Logica for 10 years, amassing over 30 years of management and global leadership experience in total throughout his career. Over the years, he's had to draw on skills such as large-scale management, teamwork, and resilience. He models professionalism, integrity, and calm decision-making, and will explore how to manage leadership roles with mentoring ones as well. Thank you for joining us.
Great to be here.
Would you like to tell us a bit more about yourself?
Yeah, first of all, I don't know how many of you really know much about SITA, because it's not a household name, but SITA was actually created by the world's airlines around 1949. So around the end of the Second World War, coming into the 1950s, there was a huge explosion in terms of the number of people wanting to travel internationally. And airlines had a big challenge around how do they communicate with each other around the world. And so to achieve that, they created SITA. So we've been around as an organisation for over 75 years now. And we really started off as that communications network for the industry. And since then, we've grown more into being a tech company. So a technology company in that way. And there's sort of 3 main focuses of the organisation. So there's one bit that really focuses at the technology that happens within an airport. So the check-in systems and the baggage systems, all of the technology you need to operate an airport itself. So we've got a division that looks at that. We've got a division that looks at aircraft. So things like cockpit to air traffic control communications, but also looking at new technology. So they use artificial intelligence to optimize the flight path of an aircraft, really looking at and predicting what the weather might be in 4 or 5 years' time, and using that to be able to predict using algorithms the best flight path to avoid turbulence and reduce fuel consumption. So that can significantly improve the sustainability of flying, which is obviously a big issue for the industry. And then the final bit of the organisation is the bit that I ran until very recently, which really covers 2 bits. The majority of it is around border management. So it's about how do countries protect their national borders from, I guess, bad actors, from people that might cause that country a concern. So they might be international crime, might be some form of trafficking, or indeed some terrorist activity. And we do a lot with governments around the world, over 80 governments around the world, to support them secure their borders from that activity. And we ideally are looking to identify those individuals that could be an issue to the country well in advance of them travelling. So when you're not necessarily needing to be stopped by a border guard and ask questions, and that individual to identify whether you could be a threat, they ideally know before you even start your journey. And really, therefore, the guard, what happens at the border point itself is really about proving your identity. So we use things like biometric technology and other sort of technology to make your journey as easy as possible. So, and that's a big part of the other bit of what I've really focused on, is really around how do we make it easy for the passengers to travel internationally. And I'm sure you've all travelled and you've all hated queuing at the border, having gone on a long flight and you've arrived at your destination and then you have to queue for an hour. That's not what we want. So we want to make it really easy to get into a country, but at the same time stop the bad people from coming in. So that's ultimately what I did. And I worked with border agencies, intelligence agencies, police looking at those different possible threats. So that's a lot of what I did. What SITA does, we do it on a global level, and we pretty much operate in every country around the world. So what that means is my team were really spread around the world as well. So we operated, as I said, we supported over 80 governments and had people in all of those different countries. And therefore, how you manage those people, it can be a challenge. So how do you manage a workforce that is spread globally? And a key tool really to enable us to support and lead those people, and importantly develop those people, is mentoring. So we've had a very successful mentoring program for many years, really looking at how do we embrace mentoring techniques to really support people on a global level. And quite often the individual's manager might even be in the same country, so a mentor can really help develop that individual in that way.
Wow.
So it's a bit about my background and the importance to mentoring, really.
Well, thank you. That was absolutely brilliant. I think best place to start would be, how did you get into this sort of career?
I probably didn't set out to be where what I've done. I went to university. I did a computer science degree at that time. So probably very different to a modern computer science degree. This is going back quite some years. And after university, or in fact, while I was at university, I was sponsored by a very large IT company who unfortunately doesn't exist anymore, but they were the sort of major IT company in the UK at that point. Therefore I had opportunities to sort of move into technology. And then really I had a good mentor very early on in my career who was able to guide me into the right sort of career direction that I wanted. And really that really sort of put me on this path. You mentioned a few of the companies I've worked for, and really it's been a sort of a constant development over that time. So I did start off obviously in quite a low level in the organisation, but then took the opportunities to grow and develop and take on new challenges. And that's what I would really encourage all of you guys when you get to that point. Is really look for those opportunities. Try lots of different things. Find the thing that you're really passionate about, because then you really do enjoy what you do. And for me, the passion was less about the technology, but it was more about leading a business, growing a business, and also leading people. At the end of the day, the business is the people that work in it. And so, really making sure you develop those people is really important.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah, I was just wondering if you had like 3 skills that we could almost use too, that your mentor has like helped you with, which 3 skills would those be?
I think if you look at what a really good mentor does, I think what sets a good mentor apart probably from many others is, I think first of all, the mentor has to inspire the mentee. They need to really show that they bring belief in what they're doing, and they tend to have a real passion for investing and growing individuals and people. So I think that's sort of a really key element to it. A second one I would say is a mentor needs to be able to support an individual, their mentee, but equally they need to challenge the mentee. We all grow through the different challenges that we need to overcome, the goals that we set ourselves. And I think a strong mentor has the skill to identify their mentee's strengths. So look at, what that individual's doing really well and challenge them to do more and to grow and develop that skill. but equally identify the areas that they're weaker in, that they need support and guidance to how they grow and develop that. So that support and guidance is really, really key as well. The third one that really comes to my mind from when I'm looking at a good mentor, and when I look at develop my team in the past have been good mentors. For me, a mentor creates energy. And probably quite difficult to describe, but I think we've all been in meetings or in classes where you've left the class, and you said it when you walked in, you feel exhausted. You know, you've had a lesson, and that was an exhausting lesson. Well, actually, a mentoring session for me, you should end it feeling energized. You should feeling that you're motivated, you want to achieve the goal that you want to achieve. And you know, there are some skills to that, you know, to be able to create that energy with somebody. Part of it is about demonstrating that you really believe in the individual. Part of it is about being positive. You know, negativity draws people down. Negativity is tiring. So if you're critical of somebody, if you're trying to support them, but you're being critical of they're doing that takes energy from people. Whereas if you're supporting and you're challenging and you're really growing that person, then that gives them energy, you know. So that's a real skill in its own right as well. So they were sort of three very different things.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Okay.
So previously you mentioned that, of course, with how widespread the organisation was, mentors might not be in the same country, let alone the same building or room as their mentees. Do you think that affects their mentorship or how their progress if they're not physically seeing their mentors?
I think it is really important that the mentor and the mentee build up a really strong engagement. You know, that they're very open with each other, and ultimately, you know, what really forms that bond between the mentor and the mentee is trust. You've got to build that level of trust in, you know, between the two. That's harder to do when you're remote. Yeah. You know, it's easier to do when you can talk over a coffee and you can share, you know, how your day's been going, and you know, you've got to be open and transparent to build that trust. But it's certainly not impossible doing it remotely. I think one of the bigger challenges doing it remotely is really understanding sometimes the cultural differences. You know, I've got people that were mentors of people in, you know, very different countries, very different cultures. And, you know, it's important to try and understand those cultures and respect those cultures. And it does change the way you may be mentoring somebody. You know, you need to be a lot more clearer in terms of the advice you're giving, you know, that sort of thing, I think is really, really important. But it's not impossible. And actually, if I go back a few years, during the COVID pandemic, everything was online, and I think we've all got used to working online a lot more than probably we were doing beforehand.
Like over the last couple of years, how would you say the mentoring program has developed? Would you say it's developed quite quickly, or is it more of a slower process?
I think most big companies really have adopted mentoring, you know, as a way forward. I mean, mentoring's been around for many years. You know, everyone. You know, I think leaders naturally mentor people in their teams. So you might not have a formal program, but I think what we've seen across industries is much more formal programs roll out, and actually companies look for people with mentoring skills when they're looking for their new recruits. If they're trying to hire somebody, they'd much prefer to hire somebody if they've got those mentoring skills. So I think that's important. What I think you've also seen is the breadth of mentoring programs has changed a lot. When I started, my first mentoring was because I was on a leadership program. with my first company. And that tended to be how, they were seeing mentoring as a good way of developing leaders. But now we use mentoring across the organisation, because actually it's positive for all people, to get that feedback and to grow and develop as individuals. So I think you're seeing much more of that at the moment. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any questions from the floor? Perfect. Ollie.
Earlier you said a mentor needs to inspire a mentee. How would you go about doing that?
Yeah, I think it's a difficult skill to be able to do. But I think, first of all, I think some people are very, they're naturally good at wanting to improve and develop and support other individuals. And I think you've really got to believe in the mentee and believe in what they're trying to achieve. And I think if you show that belief, then that can really help sort of build that trust and then build that inspiration. I think the other important element to that is to build off your own experience. If you can really portray how you've grown and developed, you can really use those real life examples yourself with that, then you can inspire the individuals hopefully and motivate the individual to achieve those goals. And then it is about setting out very clear goals. So agreeing ideally with a mentoring relationship right at the start. You want to set out what your goals are that you want to achieve, and come up with an approach that is going to help the mentee achieve those goals. And I think if you can demonstrate, you can somehow track the performance indicators of how you're achieving those goals, then you can create that belief, you can create that motivation to succeed. But it's a difficult thing to do.
During your time mentoring, what would you say is like the biggest challenge, which could make the difference between a good mentor and a bad mentor?
Well, I think first of all, you've got to make sure the match is right between the mentor and the mentee. We're all different, we're all individuals, and some people just naturally wouldn't get on well together and develop each other. So having that common experience or relevant experience that you can give the mentee is really important. So matching it is really key. Commitment is also important. I think where I've seen mentor relationships fail is when one of the two parties are not fully committed to doing it. So you end up in situations where you might have a regular meeting and they get cancelled, or you agree on some actions and they're not carried out, and the action could be on you as the mentor. Quite often in a business situation, one of the key challenges in leadership roles is growing your network. How do you as an individual quite low in the organisation build your network around, and your mentor can really help with that, and therefore they might be taking actions as well. So it's about you almost need a contract between the mentor and the mentor at the start to make sure you have that commitment, that you're going to follow this through, that you're going to do all the things that you should be doing and finding time to do it. And it's never easy finding time, but it's important.
Thank you.
As you just said, it's never easy finding time. What would you say the best way to find time would be?
Yeah, it's never easy. And believe it or not, when you're working in an office environment, you're always busy. So finding time to do mentoring can be an issue. Personally, I always saw it as a really important thing to be able to do, because it helped balance your work life balance in some ways, in that if you're constantly focused on what you're trying to achieve and your output and your context, your studies and what you want to achieve, that can be quite draining. And actually mentoring, if it's done in the right way, as I said, can be quite energizing. It can give you energy as well as the mentee energy. So it's important to find time to do it, and it can help create a bit of balance. For me, it is about just having the right plans and structure in place. So, typically when I mentor somebody, I have a regular session with them. So I'd have it scheduled in my diary. I know on that particular, day of the week, that particular time, that I'll have that session in place. And it's about making sure that you keep to it. But it's probably also important that you find or you block out other time in your diary, because it's not the time of doing mentoring is not just the time when you're physically together. You do have to do those actions. You do have to plan for the next meeting. So it's really about scheduling and planning and making sure that you're using your time to the best level. And I think there's also always an issue that we're always busy. We always fill our diaries, whatever we do. It might be doing sport, it might be doing music, or whatever you're trying to do. But you need to prioritize what you want to achieve. And if you just don't have time to do some things, then you've got to look at that list and stop doing some activities, unfortunately, because at the end of the day, you're better off doing those things really well than trying to achieve and do too many things.
Thank you, Jeremy. So you've mentioned energy from both the mentee and the mentor. You've also mentioned KPIs and planning what you want to get out of the mentoring relationship. As a parent of an old Stoic, what type of KPIs do you think these mentors could think about to help them understand what they're getting out of being a mentor, and also what they might want to help guide their mentees towards?
Yeah, so I think that you've got to start with what does the mentee want out of the engagement, the mentoring. So what do they want to achieve? What's their aspiration for doing the mentoring? It could well be that, and I think in your context, a lot of the people you're mentoring are new to Stowe. So it could be one of their initial early goals is really just support in getting to know the school more, and understand the culture of the school. And it's a much bigger school probably from the one that they've come from. So it's going to be a bit daunting for them. So you can set a KPI to say, I want to achieve this by this date. I want to be comfortable with the layout of the school. I want to be comfortable with my lesson schedule by a certain time or date. But you can also start then setting some longer term goals and some KPIs, so key performance indicators that enable you to monitor whether you achieved that goal or if you're on the right track to achieve the goal. So yeah, it could be many different things. It could well be sporting. Am I doing enough training? Am I doing? Have I made the team? Or it could be more academic in that way.
You mentioned aspirations. How do you strike a balance between supporting and challenging your mentees?
Yeah, it's important you get that, both of those. And as I said, challenge for me is really important if you're going to help them really develop and grow. Somebody could be really good, they could be top of the class, achieving everything, and actually in the mentoring session, if all you're doing is praising them for the great activity that they're doing, they're not necessarily growing and developing any further. So I think it's getting the balance right between support and challenge and setting strong goals. But I think in both contexts, it's about doing it in a very positive way. So you don't want to be challenging somebody in a negative way that, you know, they haven't achieved this, you know, you've got, you know, it is about staying positive, and that's going to create that energy that we spoke about earlier. I don't know if I answered the question actually.
One more question? If anyone's got one.
So to finish off, for our new mentors who've just started in the lower sixth, have you got any top tips for the next couple of weeks to build that rapport with their new mentees?
Yeah, I think, well, certainly I think the more time you spend with them, you know, so structure a time when you actually are going to get together and meet, I think is important. As I said, probably the most critical thing you do early in the mentoring relationship is building that trust. And so when you get together, just be open and honest with each other, have a discussion around what do they want to achieve from the mentoring, and set those goals early on related to that. But that engagement is really important. The other tip I would certainly say is you should be listening more than you should be speaking. A key for being a mentor, actually, you know, you do need to do more listening, and be an active listener. So a big top tip is, you know, sometimes you can listen to somebody and you can all, actually a previous mentor of mine called it TV eyes. You know, you can, you know, it's sort of your eyes turn off, and because you're listening still, but you're not demonstrating you're listening. And it's important that the mentee knows you're listening. So, you know, giving acknowledgement of what they're saying, or repeating it back, or asking questions related to that, I think is really key. So listening is really important. The other tip I would give definitely as well, I think, again, it helps build that trust. And maybe you're better off doing it when you've got a level of trust built, but it is about giving feedback. And a general leadership thing I would do with all of my leaders in an organisation, whether they're mentors or not, is encourage them to give feedback to people across the organisation. People feel nervous about giving feedback, and but it is really important if they're going to develop and grow. If they don't know they're doing something wrong, or they're doing something in the wrong way, then they're never going to grow and develop. But equally, if they're doing something in a really positive way, they might not equally recognise that. You know, they might just naturally be doing it, and giving them feedback to say you've done a great piece of work there. You know, carry on doing that. But when you give feedback, it is about doing it positively. You know, you don't want to give negative feedback. It's about constructive feedback. So there's a few things there that sort of throw in.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Jeremy, for joining us. I'm sure they've learned a lot.
Yeah, definitely. Very
Good.
Thank
Well,
you.
it's been a pleasure. Thank you.